I woke up to the sound of machines, beeping, and a pain so deep it felt like my bones were burning from the inside out. And before I could even open my eyes properly, I heard my dad's voice break in a way I had never heard in my entire life as he cried and said, "Your mom didn't make it. You're the only one left now." And in that moment, before the doctors, before the fire, before anything else made sense, I remember thinking one horrifying thought over and over again. This wasn't an accident, and somehow, I was the only one who survived it. So tell me honestly, if you were lying there barely alive, realizing your entire world had just burned down, would you want the truth no matter how ugly it was? Or would you rather live with a lie that keeps you breathing? The smell of smoke still lived in my lungs when I finally forced my eyes open. Everything was white and harsh and too bright, like the world had been scrubbed clean without my permission. My throat was raw, my skin felt tight and sore, and every time I tried to move, my body reminded me that it had barely escaped something violent. My dad sat beside the bed, his face swollen and red, his eyes hollow like someone had scooped the life right out of him. He looked older in that chair, smaller somehow. And when he noticed I was awake, he grabbed my hand like he was afraid I might disappear too. He kept apologizing over and over, saying he should have woken up sooner. He should have smelled the smoke. He should have saved her. I didn't understand what he meant yet. Not fully, because my head was foggy and my memories came in flashes instead of a straight line, but I knew enough to feel a fear settle deep in my chest. Something terrible had happened in our house, and whatever it was, it had taken my mom away. Before the fire, my life wasn't perfect, but it was familiar. We lived in the same house I grew up in, a slightly worn place with creaky floors and walls that held decades of arguments, laughter, and silence. My mom was the kind of woman who kept everything running without ever asking for credit. She woke up before everyone else, went to bed after everyone else, and somehow still managed to remember birthdays, appointments, and what groceries we were running low on. My dad, on the other hand, was quieter, more withdrawn. He worked long hours, came home tired, and spent most evenings in front of the TV, half listening to whatever was on while my mom talked about her day. I used to think that was just how marriages worked, that love settled into something dull but dependable over time. But in the months leading up to the fire, something shifted. The air in the house felt heavier, like every room was holding its breath. My parents argued more, not loudly at first, but in those sharp, whispered voices that feel more dangerous than yelling. My mom started sleeping less. I'd find her at the kitchen table late at night, staring into a cold cup of tea, like she was waiting for something that never came. When I asked her what was wrong, she'd smile too quickly and say she was just tired. My dad grew even more distant, spending nights working late and weekends away, claiming he needed space to think. I didn't know what he was thinking about, but I knew it wasn't good. The night of the fire is burned into my memory in pieces. I remember going to bed later than usual because my parents had been arguing again, this time louder. I remember my mom crying, my dad slamming a door. I remember lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was the night everything finally fell apart. And then I remember waking up choking, my room filled with smoke so thick it felt solid. The smoke alarm was screaming, a sound so piercing it cut through the panic for just a second. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding, my eyes stinging. And when I opened my bedroom door, the hallway was a wall of black and orange. I screamed for my mom. I screamed for my dad. I don't remember hearing my own voice, just feeling the vibration of it in my chest. I tried to run toward their room, but the heat pushed me back like a physical force. Flames licked the ceiling, and the air felt like it was trying to kill me with every breath. I panicked. I didn't think. I just reacted. I turned and ran the other way, toward the stairs, toward the front door, toward anything that wasn't fire. I remember slipping, falling, the world spinning, and then nothing. When I woke up in the hospital and my dad told me my mom was gone, those fragments snapped together into something that made me feel sick. She hadn't made it out. Somehow I had. Everyone kept calling me lucky. The doctor said if I'd stayed inside even a minute longer, I wouldn't be alive. Nurses smiled gently at me and told me I was strong. Friends and family visited, bringing flowers and casseroles and condolences. But every time someone said how grateful they were that I survived, I felt this twisting guilt in my stomach. Because if I was lucky, then what did that make my mom? As the days passed, the shock started to fade, and in its place came questions that wouldn't leave me alone. The fire marshal said the cause was undetermined, which sounded like an answer but felt like nothing at all. Our house had old wiring, sure, but it had never been a problem before. My mom was careful, almost obsessive about safety. She unplugged appliances, checked the stove twice, made sure candles were never left unattended. The idea that she'd somehow caused a fire big enough to kill her didn't sit right with me. And then there was my dad. He barely left my side in the hospital, but something about his grief felt wrong. I know grief looks different on everyone, but there were moments when his crying seemed forced, like he was performing sadness instead of feeling it. Sometimes I'd catch him staring off into space, his expression flat, almost relieved. When he thought I was asleep, he'd step out into the hallway and make phone calls, in a low voice, stopping abruptly when I stirred. Once I woke up to him whispering, "It's done," before he noticed I was awake and quickly changed the subject. Every instinct in my body told me something wasn't right. After I was discharged, we moved into a small rental across town. The house we'd lived in was condemned, a blackened skeleton of what used to be my home. I avoided driving past it, but sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of the charred remains and feel like I couldn't breathe. My dad tried to act like we could start over, like the fire was some terrible storm we'd weathered and now the sky was clear. He talked about selling the land, about insurance money, about new beginnings. He never talked about my mom unless someone else brought her up, and even then he kept it brief, like saying her name hurt him too much. I started to wonder if it hurt him at all. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames. I heard my mom coughing, calling my name. I replayed the night over and over, wondering if there was something I missed, something I could have done differently. Therapy was suggested, then insisted on, and I went. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was sitting just out of reach. I started paying attention to details instead of trying to forget them. I noticed that my dad kept a folder of paperwork locked in his desk, something he'd never done before. I noticed that he flinched whenever the fire was mentioned on the news. I noticed that he started seeing someone new barely 6 months after my mom's death, a woman who avoided my eyes and laughed too loudly at his jokes. The breaking point came when I found the insurance documents by accident. I was looking for a charger in his office when I saw the folder partially open. Inside were papers detailing the payout from the fire, and the number made my stomach drop. It was far more than I expected. As I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking, I realized the policy had been updated just 3 weeks before the fire. Increased coverage, maximum payout. My heart started racing, and for the first time, I allowed myself to think the thought I'd been pushing away since the hospital. What if the fire wasn't an accident at all? I confronted him that night. I didn't plan it. The words just spilled out of me as soon as he walked through the door. I asked him why the policy had been changed. I asked him where he really was the night of the fire before he claimed to be asleep. I asked him why my mom had been so afraid in the weeks leading up to it. At first he laughed it off, calling me paranoid, blaming my trauma, telling me I needed more therapy. But when I didn't back down, when I told him I was going to the police with what I found, something in his eyes changed. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. He told me I didn't know what I was talking about. He told me I should be grateful to be alive. He told me that if I kept digging, I might not like what I found. That was the moment I knew. Innocent people don't threaten their own children. Innocent people don't look at you like you're a problem to be solved. I locked myself in my room that night, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I realized that not only had I lost my mom, but I might be living with the person responsible for her death. So that's the situation I was in, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing the man who was supposed to protect us might have burned our house down for money and freedom, and knowing that I was the only one left who could do anything about it. Before I tell you what I did next, I want you to pause for a second and really think about it. If you were me, scared, grieving, and trapped under the same roof as someone you suspected of murder, would you stay quiet to survive? Or would you risk everything to get justice? I decided I needed proof. Suspicion wasn't enough. I started small, pretending everything was normal. I acted like I believed his excuses, like I was just a traumatized kid struggling to cope. Meanwhile, I documented everything. I recorded conversations when I could. I took photos of documents. I checked bank statements and noticed large cash withdrawals in the months before the fire. I searched my mom's old emails and found drafts she'd never sent. Messages talking about being afraid, about thinking my dad was hiding something, about considering leaving him. One email, saved but unsent, chilled me to the bone. It said, "If anything happens to me, please know it wasn't an accident." The final piece came from a neighbor. I went back to the old neighborhood one afternoon, telling my dad I needed closure. While I was there, Mrs. Alvarez from next door recognized me and hugged me, tears in her eyes. She told me she'd been thinking about my mom a lot. Then hesitantly, she said something that changed everything. She said she'd seen my dad outside late the night of the fire, carrying something from the garage back into the house. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, but after hearing about the investigation going nowhere, it had started to bother her. She agreed to tell the police if I wanted her to. I went straight to the authorities with everything I had. The documents, the recordings, the emails, the neighbor's statement. At first they were skeptical. Cases like this are messy, emotional, but as they dug deeper, the cracks started to show. Accelerant traces were found in the remains of the house. My dad's alibi fell apart under scrutiny. His phone records placed him awake and active during the time he claimed to be asleep. Slowly, painfully, the truth came out. He was arrested 8 months after the fire. The trial was brutal. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to lawyers dissect my family like a puzzle, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I testified against my own father, my voice shaking but my resolve firm. I told them about the insurance policy, about the threats, about the emails my mom never got to send. When the verdict was read and he was found guilty, I didn't feel relief the way I thought I would. I felt empty. Justice doesn't bring people back. It just stops the bleeding. Now, years later, I still think about that night. I still wake up sometimes smelling smoke that isn't there. I still wonder if there was a moment when things could have gone differently, when my mom could have been saved. But I also know this. I survived for a reason. I carried the truth when no one else could, and I refused to let it be buried in ashes and lies. Losing my mom broke me in ways I'll never fully recover from, but standing up for her gave me a strength I didn't know I had. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that silence can be just as deadly as fire. Trust your instincts, even when the truth is terrifying. And never let anyone convince you that asking questions makes you weak. If you are on my side in this story, if you think I did the right thing by speaking up, like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this, because there are so many truths out there waiting to be told. And share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.